Alright guys, welcome back to another part of this video. So last time we got all the jugs honed and cross-hatched, and we got the all the pistons, the ring set and them installed. So we're just going to go ahead and finish getting these installed now. So all we got to do is we got to knock these wrist pins through, so you can see me do that. There's nothing too special to it, it's just rotating the engine over until this lines up with this and getting it pushed back. And then after we do that, we'll go ahead and get the heads installed. So. Alright guys, back at you now that we got the heads on. Off camera, I realized that I actually got the heads reversed. So we have to remember it's important to get these heads in their correct orientation. Where we put the extra retainer on has to go towards the exhaust port. So just a stupid mistake on my part. So anyhow, now that we got those on, we got them torqued. The next step is to cut the push rod tubes. So I already did this side over here, just to make sure I got it figured out. But what's important and what needs to happen is that for the cylinders that run, they stay stock. For the push rod tubes for the air compressor, they're what have to be modified. So this first one has to be modified by 1/8 of an inch taken off, and this one needs to be modified with 1/4 of an inch taken off. So I'll show you on the directions provided. So due to the very low design, it has to be changed. And so this can be accomplished with a tubing cutter or hacksaw, replace the ball end, etc. So anyway, we'll go ahead and take that over there and I'll show you how I did it. Alright guys, so over here you can see on our push rod tubes that has this little ball at the end. So to take that out, we'll go ahead and throw a set of vice grips on here. Just like so. But that's in there pretty tight, so you're not going to be able to pull it out. These tubes are just made out of aluminum, and this ball is made out of steel. So what we're going to go ahead and do is take our propane torch, heat it up until we're able to pull this out. So in the meantime, don't try and really pry on it. It'll come out pretty easily once it's hot enough. So just go ahead and put some heat on it, and then once it's and while it's heating up, just keep slowly trying to twist these back and forth. So. All right, so there we go. This is the end that was in there. So you can see how it has this little tube back there. And now we're gonna go ahead and give this a second to cool down. But while that's cooling, we'll go ahead and get this set up. So I'm gonna start by doing the 1/8 inch tube, or the where I have to remove 1/8 of an inch, just in case I screw something up. I can always cut it down to a 1/4 inch tube, but I didn't have any issues the last time. So for me, I found the easiest thing to do was just to take a combination square, get my 1/8 of an inch. We'll just throw that right on top, and we'll make sure you have a really sharp pencil and mark it. And so you'll know to cut it at the top. So it says you can do this with a hacksaw or a tubing cutter. I thought that tubing cutter seemed easier because it'll give me a more square end. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do here. Probably still a little warm, but I figure if we just don't put our hands on it, we'll be all right. I learned that lesson once. I burned my fingers pretty bad. Wasn't thinking. So I don't feel like doing that again. Now you'll want to go ahead and deburr this, just because the last thing we want is any burrs in our engine. So just take that to clean up the inside a little bit. Go around the outside. Nothing crazy, but we just don't want any burrs. All right, so now to put this top back in, we're gonna do basically the reverse. So we're gonna go ahead and heat this up so that we can get it to expand, and then we're gonna tap this back in. And that's how you do it. So we'll go ahead and wait for that to cool down for a minute, and then we'll go ahead and do the next one. So it's the same steps, it's just that we're gonna be taking a 1/4 inch off instead of 1/8. All right, guys, so now that we have our push tubes all cut, we're ready to reinstall our valves, or our rockers. So just again, we have our two normal ones on the front. We have the one that has an 1/8 cut off for the intake, and we have the one that was cut by a 1/4 for the exhaust. So we're gonna go ahead and pull these off and put this on, and then after we get this all on, we're going to want to go ahead and adjust this, get these valves readjusted. So, and that number that we're going to readjust to is going to be, the manual says between 4 and 6 thousandths. So for me, I just went ahead and aimed for 5. Figured that seemed right in the middle. So all right, so the way that we're going to do this is we're just going to go until we see that this is out at the furthest that it can be, and I'm going to start from the back and work my way up to the front. All right, guys, and that takes care of that. So we'll go ahead on to the next step now. All right, guys, so our next step is to start just putting things back together. We will have one more modification to make with the distributor, but we'll worry about that as we get closer to it. So the next step is going to be for us to get the engine tins back on. So I don't exactly remember how these go on. I did look back at some pictures for reference, but I'm going to try and wing it. So you might see some of it coming on and off, but I'm just going to do this as a time lapse. All right, guys, so we got our engine tins on now, so we can go ahead and start putting this engine back together more. So the first thing I'm going to do here is go ahead and get the distributor installed. Something to note is that when you're doing this, you want to make sure that you get it lined up just right. So you can see that there's 2 notches in there, and theoretically, you shouldn't be able to only fit it in there one way, because you can see that the notches are slightly off center. But you just still want to double check, because if you get a bad seat in there, that's not going to be very good. Now, before I disassembled this, now the other convenient thing about the distributors on these engines is that you can take them off without messing up your timing. So this is the bolt that holds the distributor down, and this is what you undo in order to adjust your timing. So since this is already pre-timed and I haven't messed around with this, I'm just going to leave it as is once I get it seated in there, and we can let it be. So from there, we'll go on to the oil pump, or the fuel pump. All right, guys, so next up we have our fuel pump. You can see that that's what the assembly looks like. Pretty straightforward. All right, next up is the oil cooler. I went ahead and replaced the seals in here. Again, pretty straightforward. It goes right on top here. It's going to be a good time to make sure that it's clean and to check all that. I did that off camera, but just to, you want to make sure that there's nothing bulging out or anything crazy like that. In hindsight, this looks like something that would have been easier to do with these oil tins off. Or, I'm sorry, oil tins. Cooling tins off. But, oh well. It can certainly still be done with them on. Alright guys, so next we're just installing the generator stand. More pretty straightforward stuff. Alright guys, so I just went through all the trouble of putting the fan assembly back on, only to realize that I had forgotten to put this on, that this has to go on first. So we're going to go ahead and do that now and we'll re-record putting the fan assembly on, because I did learn a couple of tricks for that. So, but it is all just more pretty standard stuff. So, you Alright guys, so just a few things to make your life a little bit easier when you get ready to install the doghouse or the fan cover or whatever you want to call it. One is going to be to take this heater tin down to lower it, so it's going to be easier to hook this up. Another thing is going to be to put this on and take it off for that matter. You have to remove this right here from here. And it's also going to be easier to remove the doghouse part that clips in here and goes right here. It'll just make it a lot easier to try and connect this again later, like so. And then just make sure that this bolt is loose. This bolt, which is now missing, is loose. I'll have to find that. And that you have the bolt loose that's on the back of the oil cover here. So, and then this rod right here is going to fit down right in between the head over here. So just watch that. So, go ahead and start trying that. Alright guys, so I paused the video for a second there because I had a crazy idea that that bolt that I just said I was missing might have fallen into the intake manifold before I put this on, when I did it off camera. And sure enough, that's where it was. So just always be making sure. I really should have double checked that. Oh, that was the wrong bolt. Here it is. You guys just really want to make sure you're double checking that and double checking your ports, making sure that your ports are always plugged when whenever you're doing anything, just so that nothing does accidentally falls in. So just a word to the wise, as someone who has now taken this thing on and off 3 times now. So anyhow, we're just going to go ahead and keep moving forward on this. So we got one bolt here, just a 10 mil, another one back here, another one right here. Then next, we'll go ahead, get this installed. So there's a little threaded rod that came down here. You'll screw this on first. And you know what, actually, we'll get back to that in a second, and I'll bring the camera over here to show you a couple things back here. But while we still got this up, we'll go ahead and get the band back on our generator here. That is a, I think that's a 13 mil with a nut underneath, so you will need a wrench. A little bit of a pain in the neck to get to, but. Right, and then I think that takes care of the front for now. You will notice that I have a weird doghouse port there. I'm not really sure what the story is for that. I know this engine came out with Carmen Ghia instead of a Beetle, so I don't know if that had I was modified for that or something. But anyhow, let me take the camera back here. Down. All right, so this is what I was talking about right here. This right here. There's a little threaded rod that I showed you that came down through the doghouse through these cylinder heads. This is what's going to open and close these fans right here. That helps it warm up a little bit faster. And then as it gets hot, this will open up those fans so that way it'll cool the engine down. So we'll go ahead and get this threaded in here. And then we will take this bracket up. All right, and now that that's on, we can put that cover back on, which I'll do in a second. But the other thing I wanted to show is, so this is where we remove the doghouse. I'll show you how to put that back on in a second. But while the doghouse is off, it's much easier to put this back on. So you just slide that on, this washer, and then this clip. Okay, from there. This just slides right up here. Need a 10 mil to do that. All right, guys, so I got the crankshaft pulley installed off camera. I was trying to start figuring out the timing just so I had an idea of what I was doing, but in order to do that, it was really helpful to get this on. Nothing too special about this other than it's just really tight, so you're going to want to make sure you have lubrication on it. And it took me quite a few minutes to get it, but we did get there. So, and then the next thing up here is actually one of the modifications we had to do. There was no good way to get a camera angle of it, but we got cylinder 1, 4, 3, 2. And what we had to do is, obviously cylinders 1 and 4 are for compressed air. So we don't really need spark to them anymore. That would be unhelpful anyway. So what we had to do is we had to eliminate those spark plug wires. So they say to go ahead and ground it to this bolt down here. So it doesn't have to be that bolt, but it has to be grounded somewhere to the engine. So they said to just snip the wires and then ground the connections to there. So I have this one wire going to here. Obviously that's cylinder number 4. And then this other wire going over here is cylinder number 2. So that's the modification. You can see in the directions here, if needed. The ignition system also needs a slight modification. Since the engine is now 2-cylinder, the non-running wires for the distributor must be grounded. This eliminates cross-firing and premature ignition failure. The procedure is 1, shorten the wires, 2, install lugs on wire ends, install the wire lugs under the distributor hold-down bolt. So, and then next, one of the things we have to do is we have to worry about this crankcase pressure, but we'll get to that in a minute. All right, guys, so the next step we're going to be working on is that we need to modify these valve covers and our intake filter. So what they were saying is that with this, it can cause an oil leak because of pressure buildup. So what they said you to do is to pop a hole in the valve cover and vent it up to it. So as you can see what they're doing there. So we're going to do that with brazing. So I picked up some brazing rods. I probably won't be able to record me doing the brazing because I'm going to have to take that over to work. But I have this 1/2-inch copper pipe, which has a 5/8 outside diameter. So I'm just going to use 5/8 cooling line. Or, not coolant line. I guess coolant line. And run that up there. So I'm going to be drilling a hole to fit that in both of these, if I can find. So that's my one hole there. That's going to be my other hole there. I'm going to put another hole here and here. So nothing too spectacular. Just got to drill those out to 5/8. But just want to document what we're trying to do. Alright guys, so I got these brazed on, and I wish I could give you some sort of tips or tricks regarding this, but I can't. I got brazed 4 of these on, the 2 on here, and then the 2 on these valve covers. And from the time I started to the time I finished, I can't definitively say that I know anything more about brazing. I think in hindsight, what would have been the smarter thing to do would have been to actually just buy steel tubing and weld that on. But I had the copper around and I wanted to try my hand at brazing. I think what made this so difficult is that this metal is just so thin, and I think these rods are a little too thick for what I'm trying to do. So anyhow, but we got them done. One thing I did notice is while I was cleaning this, I have these 2 little holes down at the bottom here. There's one there and another one down there. So I gotta get those welded up. But anyhow, in the meantime, we're gonna go ahead and get the carburetor back on here, and we're gonna get the exhaust mounted on here. Now, a modification I made to this exhaust was, since we no longer have the rear exhaust heater tubes in here, we don't need these spots right here. So I just went ahead already and welded these blanks on here. I noticed that the kit does give you these little plugs, which look like they would have fit in there pretty good. But mine were rusted out anyhow, so it was going to be easier to weld than to try and fit those on there. And another thing we can go ahead and do too is put these in here. So that one fits in there perfectly. This side over here, you can see it's been modified somehow. I'm not really sure what the purpose of that contraption is. I know it came out of a Carmen Ghia, so I don't know if that is a factory modification or someone's personal modification. But this does not fit in here very good at all. So I'm going to see if I can beat it in there. Otherwise, I might very well just undo these 4 bolts and make my own little metal blanking plate to go over that. So anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and get those things done, and I'll see you after that. Alright guys, so we got the exhaust installed and finished getting this carburetor on, and I wanted to show you this design that they had for setting the exhaust. I'm sorry, not the exhaust, setting the throttle. So the way that they set it up is that it's a fixed throttle. So it always sits at a specific area. So you can see we have the clamp down here that goes around here, goes around this piece of sort of welding rod. You have your swivel right here and that right there. So you can kind of figure out what works best for you. I think long term I'd like to do an adjustable throttle, but for now this works. Alright guys, well, she's starting to look like an engine again. I went ahead and off camera, I got this set up. I got this patched up and just got these hoses cut to go on here. I'm missing another hose that goes from here to here. I believe that's 1/2 inch line. So I got to pick up more of that from the store. So the only thing really left in terms of the engine is I got to get the ignition coil bolted up, and we got to run all of our electrical and our fuel pump, get that plumbed in. But I think we're not going to do anything else until we get a frame set up and we get ready to test fire. So before we can make the frame, we're going to go ahead and get this transmission disassembled, and cut off the front of the bell housing. So we'll probably cut it off somewhere about up here. But we gotta get this taken apart first before we can do that. And then we'll start making a frame. So this is gonna conclude this part. And then the next part will be probably cutting up the transmission and getting a frame built for this. Then we should have probably just one more video of doing the electrical and the plumbing for it. So that's going to be plumbing for the air and for the fuel. Now my current tentative game plan is to use this tank as my air tank. And the reason for that is because it has these fairly large ports. So I can use these to plumb one cylinder in, the other cylinder. And then this will be my exit port. And then over here, I'm tentatively thinking of using this for my fuel tank, which is way too big for what I need. But it is a tank that I have around, and it would be nice to not have to fill up hardly ever. So, we'll see. This ideally would have been better suited for the air tank, being that it was originally an air tank. But these ports are too small, and I don't really want to get in with trying to weld something that's going to be under pressure. I don't trust my welding skills that much. But anyhow, alternatively, I have one of these boat things to run it, but we'll have to see. Because if I'm going to add a fuel tank, I would like to do that underneath where the closer to the ground. So anyway, we're still figuring that out, but we'll get back to you again with another video soon.